It's 11 o'clock, so we'll start to get kicked off here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I know it's towards the end of the conference and everybody's getting tired, but this should be pretty fun presentation on how UC leaders are using occupancy data to optimize operations across multiple different departments. This started out kind of as dining focused, but we broadened it up a little bit because one of our speakers, Bill Prime from UC Santa Cruz, couldn't make it to the conference, had an urgent, unexpected conflict. So I'm going to be filling in, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how OccuSpace works across 6 different campuses of the UCs. And then, so I'll kind of start here with just introductions on who we've got talking today. Click on the desktop. Okay. All right, perfect. So I'm Nick Halverson, CEO, co-founder of OccuSpace. Excited to talk today. And with me, I've got Charles Wilcox. Charles, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm Charles Wilcox.
Oh, maybe.
Frame, apparently. But anyway, I'm Charles Wilcox. I'm the Associate Director of Housing Dining. And I guess I'm out of my realm because I'm a food and beverage guy. Have been all of my career, starting with colleges within the UC system and outside the UC system, and also food and beverage with Disney. And so I do want to say we embrace technology. Y'all are techies, from my understanding, and it's been very important for us at UCLA, most specifically, and really important for us in that sense. And I'll get into that once I pop back up.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. Really excited for you and grateful for you to be talking and presenting with us today. And as I said, Bill Prime unfortunately wasn't able to make it, so I'll be covering for his section a little bit today. And so I thought I'd get started by first talking about what OccuSpace actually is, so you guys have that background. And then Charles will talk about how it's being used at OccuSpace, and I'll talk a little bit about how it's being used across 6 of the UC campuses today. And I'm actually really excited for UC Tech because I was a UCSD grad. I started OccuSpace as a student at UCSD, and really we wouldn't be a company without the help of the UCs, the UCIT folks, and the whole UC organization. So I want to give a little bit of background on OccuSpace and how it got started as well. So at our core, we're an occupancy data company. We count how many people are in a place in real time with sensors that we plug into an outlet. And we scan for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal data and figure out how many people are in the space. And this all started when I was a junior electrical engineering student at UCSD. I hated how crowded our library was. And I was like, geez, I spent 20 minutes looking for a seat to study here. I wish I knew how busy every floor was before I came. And that was the aha moment. I was like, you know what? This would be a really cool senior project. I can get my buddy to help do this, who's a master's in machine learning. I'll build the hardware, he'll do the algorithms, and we can create a neat product that students will like. And so that's what we did. We spent almost a full year. We won some pitch contests at UCSD. We won about $5 grand in pitch contests. That allowed us to buy some hardware. I asked the library, gyms, and dining halls, hey, can I put these sensors in your spaces? And they graciously said, sure, see what happens. And then I talked to IT and I said, can I join your network with these devices? And they said, sure, okay. And that was like, everybody was really taking a big leap of faith with a student that didn't know what he was doing. But so thankful that they did. We launched this app on campus that showed students how busy all these student spaces were in real time. And on the first day, I made one Facebook post and 5,700 students downloaded the app, like 20% of the student body at the time. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm not the only student here that hates how crowded it is. And it was really fun, but it was still just a school project. I was gonna go put it on my resume, get a real job when I graduated. And then 2 weeks later, the vice chancellor in charge of resource management and planning, Gary Matthews, he came up to me, or he called me and he said, Nick, how do you have all this data on our buildings? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to graduate. I'm going to get expelled. Like, this was a little bit like handshake deals with all these folks that helped me out here. But he went on to say, UCSD spends $1.2 billion a year on new construction, and we have no data on how any of our buildings are being used. And I was like, wow, that seems like a pretty big problem. I spend like 25 bucks a year on this website that we have for OccuSpace, and I have data on how many people come, what they're clicking on, and how long are they staying. And so this idea in my head kind of started to form of, can OccuSpace be the web analytics for the physical world? And can this be a real company? And so Gary Matthews at UCSD deployed us across more of the campus, paid us. We got our first contract from them. Then up the road, UC Santa Barbara became our second customer. UC Irvine became our third customer. And when I graduated, we took it full time, raised some funding from investors. And we've been doing this for about 5 years now. We work with almost 50 universities across the country and a lot more corporate customers as well, including folks like Cruz, the self-driving car company out in San Francisco. We monitor all their offices across the country. And so it's been a really, really cool journey of a UC student who had a funky student project idea, approached all these folks at a UC, and from IT to all of the student groups to the chancellor of the school really helped this become a real company. Today, we're a 25-person company and still growing. It's not the biggest company that's come out of UCs, but I wanted to kind of start with a little this backstory and thank everybody here, because there's probably 10,000 other students like me who the UCs have really helped create companies and change a lot of people's lives. So this event is a little bit special for me because I'm very grateful to the UCs, and I wanted to share that background. But now we will get into more of the technology and what we actually do. And so, Andy, I actually don't have a sensor. Do you have a sensor in your bag, or Matt does? Two of my colleagues that are here. I'll grab this. Always like a little show and tell, so this you can actually see what this looks like. So this is the sensor that we developed at OccuSpace. You peel off some adhesive from the sides, you flip out this prong, plug it into an outlet, and it scans for all the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal data in the area. So we see how many phones, laptops, iPads, watches, headphones are in the area. And what we do a really good job of is normalizing that signal data to a people estimation with about 93% accuracy. And so we know that these 5 signals over here is one person, and these 2 signals over here is one person. And we do that very well. And we have over 20,000 verified customer headcounts submitted. We have 93.5% accuracy on average. And Compass Group, the dining facilities company, actually compared us to one of the leading camera solutions in their dining facilities. And we were 3% more accurate than them, which was really great to see. But in the grand scheme of things, 3% accuracy is not that big of a deal. But what is a big deal is we were 3% more accurate while being 8 times cheaper. So that was why we were pretty excited about that. And the big things of why people work with OccuSpace and the solution that we've developed is that it's self-installable. One sensor covers every 3,000 square feet versus our competitors cover 200 to 400 square feet with one sensor that has to be ceiling mounted. So there's no infrastructure changes necessary. We generally cost about 12 cents a year per square foot because every device costs 400 bucks a year per sensor. And that includes all of our services that we offer, our access to the data, API, dashboard. And so it's very simple solution, and we don't capture any PII. We're CCPA and GDPR compliant, which is obviously a big thing, especially in universities. And this solution is so unique on the market because we developed it as students on a university campus, and we won 5 or 6K in pitch contests. So we didn't have a ton of money to buy the nicest equipment. We didn't have the university willing to pull cabling all over our building and do a big infrastructure CapEx expense to help us. So we were forced into innovating to make a cheap and easy to deploy solution actually work. And we had a year to do it. And we're able to take Bluetooth and Wi-Fi data and get to accurate people counts. And we're the only ones on the market that have been able to do that. Everybody else is using some form of camera technology. And so I really like that all of these differentiators stemmed from us kind of being students on a campus, solving this problem on a shoestring budget. And it's turned into all of our biggest differentiators. So this is the Weights mobile app. This is what we launched when I was a student. You can download it on Android and iOS today and see dozens of schools on there. And this is what the original use case for OccuSpace was, is how busy is the gym, dining halls, and libraries in real time. Students can click in and see what's the forecast for the day, what's every floor of the library look like. And it really is pretty popular with students, as well as integrating this data in real time on library, gym, and dining hall websites. And even digital signage. When you walk into spaces, walk into the library, see how busy every floor is on digital signage. This is still to this day very, very popular with students, and a big reason why a lot of the UCs and a lot of other schools work with us. And then what's really developed over the last several years with OccuSpace is the different use cases on the administrative side with our historical data. So we have a web portal where administrators can log in and access historical data on how people are using our space. And this is kind of the web analytics for the physical world view. And the use cases for this continue to grow more and more over time. It started out with figuring out, what are the busy times in the libraries and dining halls and gyms, so we can adjust our open hours and maybe save on some staff scheduling. UCSD figured out that we had like 4 floors that were open 24/7. They only needed 2 floors, and they were able to kind of reduce some of those costs. I think it was UC Santa Cruz saw that in some of their dining halls, or maybe this was actually a school in Georgia, they were able to close their dining halls 2 hours earlier, reduce that staff, and instead have a food truck outside. And so a lot of these different use cases started to come up. One of the first ones was UCSD did a renovation to the 8th floor of their library, and they used our data to measure pre-post renovation what was the utilization, and it was about a 60% boost in utilization. And so the library was able to use that data and make funding requests to do the same renovation in more spaces in the library, and those funding requests with our data have a much higher likelihood to get approved. So those are some of the administrative use cases for our data. And here a little bit later in the talk, I'll talk more on UCSD and how they're also using us in the library, or in the administrative and faculty office space, which is kind of the newest and fastest growing use case for our data as well. But I'll touch on that a little bit later. The fast install and launch process is something that we really pride ourselves at OccuSpace. We like to say we can be live in weeks, not months. It doesn't take a ton of time to get up and running because there's no infrastructure changes, no heavy upfront CapEx expenses. We just look at floor plans, and customers can either self-install or we'll do a professional install in their places. University of Rochester still holds the record for the fastest self-install. They did about 120,000 square feet in 45 minutes with 2 people doing it. And it's only about 1 sensor every 3,000 square feet. So I think it was like 35 sensors or something. And so you're literally just walking around plugging these in outlets. It's not rocket science. Some schools will want us to come out and do it. And I'm like, honestly, you're gonna get this done in a couple hours, and you might save money on the install costs. It's not too difficult. So we like that we're really fast and easy to get up and running. And that's covers a lot of, the basics of OccuSpace. Like I said, we work with almost 50 schools across the country, including all of the UCs except Berkeley, SF, and Davis. So if you're from one of those campuses, we'll have to talk after this. And then a ton of other schools across the country, starting to get more and more into the Cal States as well. But with that background, I want to bring Charles up, talk through how he's used the product at UCLA. You have a question?
Sure.
borrow the sensors? Yeah, he asked, do people borrow the sensors? So do they go missing from time to time? And I'll say that this adhesive on the back is the same adhesive that GoPro uses to stick a camera to like a snowboarder's helmet. And so you got to be pretty motivated to get it off the outlet. That being said, I think we've got like 4,400 sensors out in the wild right now. And there was a dozen or so that went missing last year. It's not a big problem, but it is something that we see on our back end. An account manager will see that this device goes offline. They'll reach out, say, hey, can you check, is this device broken or is it missing? And we actually replace any devices that get lost, stolen, broken for free in the contract. So you don't have to worry about it. And we'll see if it does go missing. Yeah, but when I installed at UC San Diego gym, the first installation, the manager of the gym was like, Nick, these kids, like, they bring wrenches, they'll do everything. Like, these devices are going to be gone in days. And surprisingly, that hasn't been the case. So we've had a pretty good streak of it for everywhere we've been. So, all right, Charles, you can come up and talk a little bit about UCLA.
Great, thanks a lot. I'm just adding on to that. I was one of those naysayers when I first found out and heard about OccuSpace. Are these things going to disappear? Because I don't want to make that investment if they are. And lo and behold, I'll say UCLA has not lost any of them, in fact. And so that's been a big kudos to Nick and his team on that. Let's see. Here we go. All right. We were challenged, not because of just the pandemic. I'll give you some history about dining at UCLA. We're charged to provide gracious dining, hospitality first at UCLA in terms of dining services, where we have over 15,000 residents that live in the residence halls, which are our dormitories. Our facilities, we have 11 facilities. 4 of those facilities are all you care to eat facilities, and the remainder are QSRs, quick service restaurants in that sense. So prior to the pandemic, we had a need for something because high volume, high velocity, we were processing on the average over 30,000 transactions on a daily basis from our total outlets, the 11 outlets that we had. Within our all you care to eat outlets, we were seeing that we were processing over 100 folks every 6 minutes. And so we had lines. And so pandemic hit. I think within the UC system, UCLA was the only UC that totally went dark. Whereas we shuffled and shuttled people out of the residence halls back to home, but we had about 3,500 students that had to stay, and we downsized our locations. But still, we needed to abide by all the guidelines that were being put in place, social distancing and so forth, because we really wanted to put everyone at ease that we're trying to be as safe as possible. I was reading an article in some publication, read an article on Nick, his background, what he was doing, got on the phone, called, was put in contact with Andy. We talked, we have a need for you. We need to pivot real quickly. How soon can you be here? Within that week, Andy was here. We walked the space. Installation was great. They had it in place within that day or so. And then there we are with our space, with what we needed to do to manage our population so they could self-navigate whatever locations that we had open. We embrace data, we love data. I'm gonna say part of us embracing some of the data is something that we've done really well at UCLA, whereas we're rated #1 in the country in terms of dining services. Cal, listen to that. Be it through Nish. I just had to get that plug in there. And we're going on our 6th year in terms of being recognized as #1 in the country in dining. Let's see. What I found really interesting by using the services that OccuSpace provided me as the administrator for all of our dining venues at UCLA was the data. So I could see some of the trends that we were building. So then when my vice chancellor had questions, I could respond to questions because there were always questions. Well, why do you have such and such opened at the beginning of the academic year? And I would say, well, our trends change, and then we'll dial back some of our operations after the 4th week of classes. We're on a quarter system at UCLA. And so I had this data to show the vice chancellor to prove what we were seeing and what we were saying. And so that was very, very helpful for us. Also, what was extremely helpful for my operators within the restaurants, they could see the trends and see the data, not be naysayers, and then they could legitimately schedule their team member breaks based on the ebbs and the flows in terms of what they saw within the data. And that's been very successful. How we're using the data right now is we're seeing these trends and the flows. And so we're planning out for the next fiscal period in terms of what we want to do with our operations. What operations need to be just tweaked in terms of openings and closings. We're looking at the data from the first couple of months to see how we do some tweaking and so on. So it's been very, very valuable and very helpful for us. Students embrace data. And it's real-time data. It's really important for us because then they could see via using the Waze app. I look at the Waze app all the time, even when I'm away from campus, or what's going on campus and so on, just to get a sense of what's happening in terms of volume. And they navigate their locations in terms of how they dine within our areas at UCLA. In fact, our students will be the first ones to tell us that something's off. And so then we'll look at it and like, hey, we have a sensor out. So let me call someone. We have a sensor out. Well, how do you know? Well, I'm getting all these emails. Students are telling us we've got some sensors out because the flow has changed in terms of what they see to when they physically get in that space, and then it's off. And lo and behold, we've had a couple of sensors that have been out. Andy's come down right away. Great focus on customer service and getting those sensors right back up and running for us. So it's been seamless for me as an operator because I haven't had to worry about anything in that sense. Just looking at the data, working with my teams so they could look at the data and use the data effectively. Implementation, sensors got in. One piece that was real important for us at UCLA we know that our hit rates on our websites are the largest on campus. And it showed us that folks were actually looking for a couple things. The data that we've posted here, so folks know if they don't have the Waze app on their phone, they can go to our website and see this is what's trending in the restaurants and so forth. And so that's been very helpful. Within the course, yeah, here it is, it's up here. Last academic year, we had over 1.3 million hits on our website within dining. Largest hits on campus continuously. So that's been real important and helpful for us because they can see the actual real-time information. They can plan their day. They can navigate through the restaurants in terms of where they want to go and eat. Or if they have in their head, like, well, I was planning to do this, but now I'm going to stay away from that location because something's going on there and I don't have the time to hang out. And so that's been incredibly helpful for us. And once we began using OccuSpace, I was getting lots of calls from different campus departments at UCLA. Well, what is this? What are you doing? Where did you get this information from? How accurate is the data? How easy is it to review and look at? And I would have conversations with folks saying like, just open up a dashboard. We can see the trends. We do a trend analysis and so forth. So then there was lots of conversation going back between dining and libraries. So the point is like, well, let me point you in the right direction. I'm not the expert. I'm not the techie, but I can connect you to the folks that we are working with. And so UCLA is currently working with OccuSpace in terms of their libraries now. And I just have recently been getting calls from our athletic department in terms of the gyms and so on. And so that may be some discussion coming up in the near future in that sense. And that's it on my part, unless there are any questions in terms of how this has worked for dining services at UCLA.
Perfect. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate you running through that. And I really love the website integrations where when the dining halls are open, it populates the percent full of how busy all these spaces are. And we've seen a lot more schools do this integration, one, to help the student experience, but two, also to drive more traffic to that page. And then on that page, they'll post other things that they want students to be able to see, whatever local events are coming up and things like that. So it kind of can be used to drive more engagement to your website, where you can then place other things on your website that you want students to be able to see as well. So that's something that I think UCLA has done a great job of, that integration. And we're starting to see more and more schools honestly not want the students to use our app, which we're totally fine with, but to drive them to their websites.
We have someone in house that connected the dots. And so they pulled the information from OccuSpace and connected the dots to our website. And that's been very, very valuable. How we've done that, I think that he's a tech person, but that's worked out very well.
If you have a question, we have a microphone here. So people on Zoom.
Yeah, so the question was, how did the implementation actually work to integrate our real-time data onto the UCLA website? And we have an API with API documentation on our website, and we're happy to support. But generally, it's a pretty straightforward integration onto our website through our API. So I'll jump forward now. And this was going to be where Bill Prime talked about the implementation at UC Santa Cruz. Instead, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what we've done at every campus and what the big use cases these folks are using us for. And I'll say UCLA, UCI, UC Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz, we're all in the student-facing areas. It's gyms, dining halls, libraries, some combination of those. And I'd say the number one driver is generally we want to improve student experience. We want to show students how busy spaces are in real time. And then once you start to get your hands on our data, there's a lot of other things that start to come from it. One thing I'm really excited about is our data being used in more and more budget proposals, and universities seeing that it's one thing if I can anecdotally say, all of my dining halls are packed, we need another dining hall. That may or may not be approved, but if you can say with data, we are running at capacity in all of these dining halls. We need budget to build a new dining hall on campus, which is what one of our customers, not one of the UCs, is doing that right now. A different customer is doing that right now, and they've used our data to get approval to build a new dining hall. Similar for renovations. And then we're actually seeing with libraries, they oftentimes get their annual budget set based on gate counting data. And we're starting to replace that gate counting data, and they're using our data to make a justification of this is how many seats we need in the library. And that's tied very closely to the budget that they get. And so it's really exciting to me that, you know, a lot of times folks who are running these spaces, they generally know the ebbs and flows of the space. They generally know how busy a lot of these spaces. Hey, the dining hall is busy at lunchtime. That's not rocket science. But what this data allows you to do is to have unbiased quantitative data that you can pull, and you can make much better pitches and requests for funding and different initiatives that you want to do. And it hits a lot harder with administrations, it seems, so far, when you can have that data to support whatever you're trying to do on campus. And so that's been probably a big theme that we've been seeing in these student spaces, apart from just sharing how busy the spaces are in real time to the students. The other two things we're probably seeing the most here is adjusting open hours of these spaces and staff scheduling, and being able to optimize that. I think those are probably the top use cases today in the student areas. And then I want to talk a little bit more about UCSD in particular, because you can see their list is the longest. They've been our first customer, our longest customer, and they've expanded to over 6 million square feet of space on campus. So we monitor a ton of their spaces. And a big bulk of that is going to be in the administrative offices and the faculty offices, and the classrooms too. The administrative and faculty offices is the highest ROI that you can use our data for, and also the highest pushback that we will get on campus. And so I'll be transparent with that. But it ties back to the first thing the Vice Chancellor, Resource Management and Planning told me at UCSD. They spend $1.2 billion a year on new construction. And we all know that the way we use our workspaces has changed dramatically since COVID. We're all working hybrid, maybe fully remote, and these offices aren't getting very highly utilized, yet we're still building a whole lot of office space on campus. And UCSD's goal is, can we reduce departments' seat count based on how they're actually using the spaces? And that can reduce our new construction of office space. And every floor, every building we don't have to build is tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in savings for the university that can be reallocated to other budgets. And so it's easier said than done. First, UCSD tried to do this without our data. And they said, hey, IT, you guys have, I think it's about 80 employees at UCSD. So they had 80 desks. And they're like, we know you guys are working mostly remote. Can we shrink your space? And every department across all 600 departments at UCSD say, no, we need all of our space. You can't take a single desk or, we riot. And so then the space planning department comes back and says, well, we'll put OccuSpace in and we'll allocate space based on the actual utilization. And they're moving to more of a budget-like fiscal space allocation process. It's kind of a use it or lose it. And they're not trying to just take people's space that needs it. They're saying, look, if you have 80 desks and there's an average of 9 people coming every day during the workday and a peak of 23, maybe we'll give you 35, 40 desks. We're not trying to take too much space away, but if you're not using it, and this can reduce our new construction spend by 5 or 10%, that's 60, 120 million bucks a year. Those are huge numbers. And the reality is, across all of the office space we monitor, both in universities and in private corporations, the average utilization ranges between the mid-teens and the mid-20s during the workday. These spaces get used very, very poorly. And I know that nobody wants to give up their space. They don't want to go from 1-to-1 employee to desk ratios to more of a hoteling free address system. But when you look at how much money can be saved, like I really feel like, there's almost like a moral obligation that if we can save hundreds of millions of dollars a year, what more can we do with that? How many more students can get scholarships to come to the campus? How many more grad students can departments and researchers have? How much more renovations and upgrades to the facilities can we do with that kind of budget? And it's really, I think, the lowest hanging fruit of where you can save money on a campus right now is in optimizing the office space. And a lot of people don't even want to work, in the office every day anyway. So I'm hoping that as time goes on, the pushback between departments will get a little bit less and less. But it's a really exciting use case. We do it with UCSD. We do it with a couple other non-UC schools across the country. And then we do it with a lot of corporations of optimizing those office space and really saying, not who's in the office, but how many people are in the office, generally by neighborhood, by department, and using that to drive better space allocation decisions. So that's kind of the other use case that's away from the student spaces that I wanted to highlight. And with that, I also wanted to show everybody that we're working with that all the UCs, because we might have a lot of folks here that don't even know we're on their campus. And once we're approved by IT and procurement, it's a lot easier to work and share data and go across other places on campus. I want to wrap up here with a quick talk, and we can kind of open it to Q&A in this section too. But we're coming out with 3 new features this year that we're pretty excited about. I wanted to get Charles' feedback on and open this up to Q&A. Those features are daily visitor counts, dwell time, and heat maps. And a lot of people maybe get confused when I say daily visitor counts. Today, we monitor the occupancy of a room every minute of the day. We don't tell you how many different people visited that space over the course of the day. And so this is the new metric that I think is going to be really useful in a lot of different spaces to give daily visitor counts. Dwell time, I think, is going to be one of the most unique and interesting data points that we can give that is really going to tell you how a space is being used. It's going to tell you more of like, what is the visitor experience aiming to do in a space. If a student spends 20 minutes on average in a study space versus 3 hours on average, how you design that space, the furniture you buy, and the way you think about that space is going to change a lot. And so that's going to be a really exciting metric. And then heat maps, which maybe we even have an example of here, of throughout the day, how is the space filling up? What are the areas students like and don't like? Can this drive better custodial cleaning optimizations, and people clean spaces better based on how the space is being used, or also point to furniture decisions? So I wanted to bring up these features. Charles, I know you have some thought, particularly on dwell time and how that could be used in the UCLA dining. So maybe if you want to share that, that would be great. And then we can open it up to some Q&A.
Yeah, make a call. We have a conversation. I'll stand back up again. And I was really interested in the dwell time piece within our restaurant environments, specifically within our all you care to eat dining locations, because I was very interested to see, well, how long are they spending time in that space, and where they're spending that time would even translate into the heat map piece in terms of, well, where are they hanging out in our all you care to eat restaurants? Because as I had mentioned earlier, we're processing over 100 guests every 6 minutes and those all you care to eat facilities. And that would be very helpful for me as an operator to determine, like, well, are there some things that we can do within our operations to tweak things? Can we correlate what we're seeing if this was available against our menus to say, like, well, okay, that will tell us what's going on menu wise without having to then pull folks aside to analyze that stuff, because it would already be here, like in real time information. And so these were the 2 pieces here that were very interesting to me to see if it comes to fruition, that we could probably test it out at UCLA to see if there are any correlations between menus where people are hanging out within the all you care to eat spaces, and it makes some tweaks to our operations in that way.
Awesome. Thanks for the feedback there. I know that I would be spending a lot more time in an all you care to eat place when I was a student. I'd be camping out a little bit, getting my money's worth. But sounds good. Do we have any questions from anybody in the audience?
We did have an on.
We did have an online question. Ingrid asks, does this integrate with mobile ordering like Grubhub, for example, and or systems like Jamex to help with vendor and purchase management, such as influencing menu adjustments based on traffic trends, for example?
That's a fantastic question. We have not done an integration with a mobile ordering system to date. It's certainly something that we could do. Like I said, our API is pretty easy to work with. It's very standard to do an integration. I would guess the bigger the organization, a Grubhub or those types of organizations, it's probably going to be a little bit harder to get Grubhub to do the work to make that integration happen. If you had more of your in-house mobile ordering system, that would be really easy to work with your engineering team and get that done. And it's something that is certainly possible with Grubhub and other mobile ordering. The question would just be if we could get Grubhub to work with us on it, but it'd be something we would love to do. And you do, okay.
Martin Robles, UC Davis, Student Affairs. This actually looks something we can definitely utilize, but two questions come up. One of them is, I do have departments that are individual and self-funding. They share a building, they share areas. So how would I be able to say that this is your traffic here and not your traffic over here? They're in the same spaces. And also, does your devices go across floors, or is it just on a flat floor per floor?
Yeah, good questions. And the devices, how we get this process going, we get a floor plan from you, and we can break up that floor plan into multiple different zones. And so every zone will have, it depends on some number of sensors in it. And one floor could have 5 different zones that we monitor independently. So as long as the shared area between departments isn't like the same room with no walls in between, okay, yeah, then that should be really easy. If there's walls in between these areas, we can break them off separately really easily. We can break off signals that are coming from floors above and below and monitor that. So should be quick. We can connect after, and if we can get the floor plans, we could give you, a quote on what this would look like. When we work directly with gym, dining, and libraries and student unions, generally our contracts are going to be on like low enough dollar range that it doesn't need to go out to RFP or outside budget approval. When we do the campus-wide office spaces, those are a lot more square footage, and that usually goes out to an RFP process. Question back there?
Great presentation. I have a question about data privacy. So I know you mentioned you're GDPR compliant. You don't, store any PII, and it sounds like the data that you're storing is really just, counts. But I wonder about the real-time audio signals that you're capturing. Do you, and how because you have to do something to kind of determine that they're coming from the same person. So is there any sort of like identifiable information being captured and then thrown out before you store it on the back end, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, definitely good question. And privacy is a big focus of our company. So we don't capture any audio with our sensors. It's just Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal data. And so what we do see is generally a MAC address and a signal strength indicator. And that MAC address is PII. And so what we do is right as that gets scanned into our device on the CPU before it's stored into device memory, it's hashed with a SHA-256 hash and a daily changing salt. And so once it goes through that hashing process, it's no longer considered PII. It sits on device memory for usually up to a minute, where every minute we stream the data back to our cloud. If it's not connected to the internet for some reason, there's a disconnection, it could be on device for up to 24 hours. But it's the hashed MAC address at that point, no longer considered PII. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you making it out, and happy to chat if you have any more questions after this. But enjoy the rest of the day, and safe travels back to your campuses.